Oh, yeah.
What is up, everyone? Welcome back to Kanika RN. In this week's video, I'm going to talk about a concept that I hope that most of you aren't that familiar with, because it would mean that it's just not that big an issue anymore, which would be awesome. And that's the notion of nurses eating their young. We're not talking cannibalism here, folks, don't worry. Basically, this concept of nurses eating their young is this idea that older nurses make things difficult for new nurses when they first start out. They make them feel stupid for asking questions, they make them feel like their mistakes are much bigger than they actually are, and just overall don't make it so that the new nurses build in their confidence and their skill. Luckily, I haven't really dealt with this very much. I have had a couple of small issues where this did come up and I did have to address them. Two incidents really kind of stand out in my mind. The first was ages ago when I first started off as a nurse. One was a little more recently. And the way that I choose to deal with them is so different. And it really makes me reflect on how much I've changed as a person and as a nurse. The first one happened when I was a nurse for just 6 months. I was a little baby nurse, and there was a nurse who I just hated giving report to. And she wasn't even that senior a nurse. She had been a nurse on the unit for about 2 years, so she was still relatively new as well. She was a very smart, very talented, very skilled, not talented nurse. And every time I had to give a report, I would just tense up because I just felt like she was just waiting to pounce on that one thing that I had done wrong. And I'd given a report to her, hadn't had any issues on that particular day. I was leaving, I had my bag, and I was like, jaunting off because I was excited that it was all over and she hadn't found anything. And I was walking away, and she's like, Kanika, can you come here for a second? And I was like, oh no, here it goes. So I walked into the room. She had an orientee with her, and she was pointing out a mistake that I had made. And granted, I had made the mistake, but it was pretty minor. It wasn't anything that was affecting the patient's safety in any way. And she was talking to her orientee. She wouldn't address me. She was just talking to her orientee and saying, don't let this happen to you, because you just want to protect yourself and just make sure that this doesn't happen to you. And she went on for a couple of minutes, and she made me feel like this big. I should have addressed it right away. I should have taken her aside and been like, hey, I understand that I made this mistake, but it didn't need to be blown up this much, and just address it. Don't make me feel so small for this mistake that I've made. And it's not something that happened once, it had happened several times. And I never addressed it. I should have. So many times I was like, today's the day that I need to address this issue. And I could just never work up the guts to do it. And the thought of that nurse and the thought of that particular incident still pisses me off till this day. It's still just like, I have one of these little moments. But yeah, it was ages ago. And in the way that I've changed as a nurse, I had an incident recently. This wasn't so much a nurses eating their young situation, but it was just another provider. It wasn't even a nurse who was making me feel small about something. And in every interaction I'd had with them, they just seemed pissed off. And I couldn't figure out why. Like, there was no reason in my mind for the way that they were interacting with me. I let it happen a couple of times, thinking they're in a bad mood, they're busy, whatever. Finally, I just went up to them and been like, hey, there seems to be some kind of issue. You seem like you're upset with me for some reason. Is there anything that I've done? Because I would love to fix it. If not, let's just clear the air. And they said, no, nothing's wrong. And I said, okay, that's fine. And in my mind, it was done. At that very second, I tried to address it. I tried to see if there was anything that I could do to fix the situation. They told me there was nothing, and I stopped caring about it. The second that they said that, it was all done. And I felt free of it. Like, even now, I look back and I wish I had done what I did in this instance back then. Because then I could just have rid of it, rather than it still, the thought of that nurse still pissing me off till this day. Luckily, overall in my confidence as a person, as a nurse, things have changed drastically, which I'm very, very helpful. I'm very, very grateful for. There was one incident that came up recently. I was talking to my roommate about a job interview that she'd had. She's an acute care nurse practitioner. She just graduated from school and she was interviewing for a job. And someone on the panel had said, we do eat our nurses, we do eat our young a little bit here. And my roommate was a little like taken aback by it, and she was telling me about it later, and I was a little taken aback by it, because I was like, why would you want to create that sort of atmosphere to begin with? You're introducing someone new to your team, or interviewing someone who might be a part of your team, and to tell them that that's the culture here, that's the nature of our unit, is that we're not supportive, we're going to make things tough for you. It's one thing to tell someone you're interviewing for, or someone who's interviewing for a job, that hey, it's tough, it's long hours. You're gonna have to have some thick skin. That's one thing, but to say like, yeah, we may make things difficult for you for a while. I don't get that concept, and it was very surprising to me that in today's day and age, like it still exists. And interestingly, this concept of nurses eating their young, I've seen the opposite too, and you might have as well. That I've seen sometimes younger nurses treating nurses who are older and more experienced, um, kind of making them feel small when they don't understand a new piece of equipment or a technology kind of gets in their way. So it flows both ways. I don't think it's necessarily just going in one direction. But overall, I think the healthcare arena in general, the way that older nurses treat younger nurses, the way that doctors treat nurses, the way nurse practitioners, PAs, doctors, the way they interact with each other, overall, the general scenario is so much more respectful. And I think for so many reasons, this is such a good time to be a nurse. Even in the way, like, nursing instructors would tell us about horror stories where a doctor like threw a chart at them and those kind of things, and that would never stand nowadays. So outside of these couple of issues, overall I think that this is something that, for me, I think of it as a disease that's mostly eradicated. There's still a couple of instances where it pops up every now and again, but yeah, I think for the most part, I think we've made a lot of progress on this issue. But I'd be curious to hear about, have you guys ever dealt with this? Do you find that in the span of your career that it's an issue that's not as relevant anymore, or do you think it's still really relevant? So I'd love to hear your input and opinion about it. So go ahead and comment that in the section below. And as always, keep it sweet and salty, my friends, and I will see you very soon. Oh, and also, if you have not, for the month of January, I'm doing a You and Me Monday series in which I try to hit a goal of running a 5K under 30. It's going okay so far. Running still crushes my soul, and then it's like reborn after I run. So I'd be curious about what your New Year's resolutions are. Go ahead and check out my You and Me Monday video from this past week. I'll link it up here. And I will see you guys very, very soon.